duration. Now duration could be in months, in seconds, in minutes, it could be anything. Just some things have been given, like you can have like a work name, the start time, and maybe if it is a date and time, it's all that. I'm not really interested in the data type as such here, and maybe end time. This is also one thing. So some work is given, and what is given to the user. Like you are given one project, web designing project, the start time is given, end time is given to you. So at the same time, you may be given a Hibernate project, and you are asked to do something on it. So let me go over here, and let me first get the to constructor, and then the getter and setter for all of them. I'm just doing what you are already familiar. So I just created a constructor for this one, and the getter and setter. And also, I'm going to say this is going to be an embeddable object. So it's going to be embedded inside the employee. Now let me go to the employee, then let me make the employee slightly complicated. So I'm going to say an employee now is given a work assigned to this employee, and I'm going to call this as jobs. Those are the jobs that are assigned to the employee. Now, if I do this one, this is not going to serve my purpose because it's going to create only one of it. There is no difference between what I have done before and what I've done, what I'm doing it now. So it's not a collection. And if from your Java's knowledge, you know that you have two types of collection. One, a set of collection which are ordered. The other one is unordered, and you can have a repetition. So let's go for something which is not ordered, and just a collection of items or a set of items. And the word that is being used there is the set. Now, set is an interface, and it is taken from the Java.utilities. So you might have used them as a collection. You studied about the data structure. And again, for those who are not aware of this notation, it just means to say that it is not just a set of objects, it's a set of work assigned. It's not a set of anything and everything. It's a specific set, and we say that this is a generic object. It's a generic collection. Now, I'm going to just initialize it. Remember, this is an interface. It's not the concrete object. Why it is an interface, you know very well. The golden rule is not to code against the detail, code it against the abstraction. Now, I'm coding it against the abstraction. That means to say that I'm dependent on this set. I don't care what type of set is given. The employee must be able to point to that particular set. Now, if you look at here, you are given a choice from the NetBeans, and the NetBeans says that there are different types of sets are there, and I'm pleased I can assume that you have studied about the hash sets. Okay, there are other types of sets are there for those who think that you know Java. So there are other types of sets are also there. So this is what I've done is I've just created the constructor. Again, for those who have already worked with this kind of thing, why not do this on the other side? Now you may be used to this one. Just remember one thing: in the Java version 8, this is not required that on the other side you need to provide the same generic element. The compiler will assume it for you, so it's not really required. So then you have everything. Now let's go and let's look at what it is. Let me add a constructor. I'm going here. Let me add a constructor. Now, if you look at this one, and if you notice, the constructor says, the NetBeans says that I'm not going to give you one more constructor for that collection. So you are left with no other choice. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say, if you don't give it, it's all right. Just add the getter and setter for me. I'll go here and say, add the getter and setter. Then it's all done. Stop this one. And it is not truncating after the it's done. Now once it is done, I need a collection, and I'm going to put that collection in the database. Here. Let me go to the main method here. Now let me create a few things here. I'm going to create a work assigned, and I'm going to say this is the job one. Job one is new work assigned, and I'm going to say this is project one. Just assume that this was the date. I'm going to say the project is supposed to start from January and it is supposed to end on June. So let me assume that. And in the same way, I assume that there are 3 jobs are assigned to the user. And let me say this is project 2. So I assume that you have some project being assigned. This is supposed to start from March and it is supposed to go up to December. And this is supposed to start from February and it is ending on say October. So you have 3 jobs being assigned. I need to create a set here. So I'm going to create a hash set. So now I'm creating a concrete object here. So it's a hash set of work assigned. But I'm going to call this as jobs. So the new asset. And then I'm going to add them to the collection. So let me add it to the collection. Now what I have done is I have just created a collection containing 3 jobs. That's the only thing I've done. It's not associated with the employee object. Now I need to connect it to I need to get this collection, put it inside that employee object. How do I do that? So once I create this employee object, I go to this employee object and then I'm going to say set job and I assign that collection to the object. Now let's go and let's make this one. Let me go to the employee and let me make this one as at embedded. Okay, I'm now saying that this is also embedded object. I want you to embed that object into the set. Now let me give it a try and let's say how many errors am I going to get. So if we run it. So you notice that you have the I think I'm not going to get anything. It is not. I cannot give it like the embedded object because it's a collection. I need to tell it that it is a collection. Change the orientation because it's a collection, it's not a single object. So what I've done here is I have told it that this is an embeddable object, but unfortunately what I gave it to the Hibernate is not a single object, it was a collection. So what I'm saying to it is it's a collection, it's not a single object that I'm trying to give it to for you. So take it as a collection. Now, if I give it as a collection, what does it do? If you notice here, it did two things. So here, the first table is as it is. There is no change in the first table. There is hardly any change here. After that, it created one more table called as employee underscore job. And then it added something into it. What was the reason? The reason is obvious. I'm trying to give it a collection of objects. Now just assume that you have a table here and the columns are getting repeated. Now it cannot keep on creating the columns. The reason here is that collection may have two objects or the collection may have four objects. So for example, you just take an employee. An employee may be assigned two works, or an employee may be assigned 4 jobs, or the employee may be assigned 10 jobs. Now how many, if it is trying to add everything in one particular table, how many columns it is supposed to create? So that number of columns will vary, and what will happen if it tries to do that is, suppose if it creates a column like 10 columns here, and if the employee is given only one job, remaining the first few columns may be filled for that employee, and for the job 2, job 3, job 4, all of them will be null values. And you know very well, the good thing about the table design is you're not supposed to put unnecessary blank columns within the table. So if suppose say one employee has 100 jobs assigned to it, and if it places everything in one table, and if there is one employee with only one job, what will happen is that the employee with the 100 job, all the columns will be filled. And employee with just one job, the remaining that 99 jobs columns will all be null values. So this is not a great way of designing a table. So what it does now is, it's going to say that I'm not going to touch the employee table. So the employee table will have the common values, that is employee name, all the details, the address, whatever you have given. But I'm going to create one more table for you, and in that table, I'm going to create the common format. What is this common format? I have given there the work name, the start time, and the end time. Now, suppose if you just look at this particular class here, and if suppose somebody asks you to create a table for this class, you are going to create a table with the 3 columns. One for the work name, other one is the start time, the third one is the end time. So what it does is, it's going to say that, okay, for the employee, I'm going to create a table with all the values. So that is the common one, that's the previous one. I'm not going to touch that thing. But now I'm going to create a separate table for you that has only 3 columns. So one is the work name, the other one is the start time, the third one is the end time. Then how do I going to link these two fields together? You know very well, it's a simple idea. I'm going to take the primary key from here, and then I'm going to create a foreign key at this place, and I'm going to link this record with the other record. What's the advantage with this kind of design? You know very well, with this design, if a employee has, let me give it a slightly longer value here. Now suppose if you have an employee, assume that I'm going to just talk only about the employee ID here, not anything else. Suppose say you have an employee ID with the value 1, and then if this employee ID or if this employee is assigned 3 works or 3 jobs, how am I going to connect them? So I'm going to create a foreign key for this employee ID, and then I'm going to link this one here, and I'm going to say this is the first job that is assigned to the employee. After that, again, I'm going to repeat this is a foreign key. This is the foreign key of the previous table, and then again I'm going to repeat this thing, and I'm going to say this is the second job of the employee. And again, I'm going to repeat one more thing for the third employee, and I'm going to do it. What's the advantage here? If an employee has 100 jobs assigned to him, he will have 100 records in the other table, and there will be a primary key, foreign key relationship. And that is what it's going to do. Now let's look at what it has done. If you go to this particular table now, and I will just refresh this on this time, you notice that it has created two tables. One is the original employee table, and if you look at this original employee table, there is hardly any change in that original employee table. You still have the employee ID as the primary key, but it has created one more table for me, and that table is the employee job. What is there in this employee job? Employee job has the work name, start time, end time. But what is the connection between these two things? Connection between these two things is this is the primary key, and that is linked to the foreign key at the other side. So you notice here that you have the employee ID from here being linked to the employee ID at that location there, but it's not taking me down for this. So somewhere down you can see that. That's the link between them. Let me show it with the query. So this is your employee table, and you notice that there is hardly any change in the employee table. Employee table has everything except that you have the employee ID 1, 2, 3, which is the primary key, and the remaining part is not really of interest to us. Now, suppose if I go to the other table here, and in the other table, if I view what is there in the other table, you will notice that the other table has this configuration. So, what is there here is this is the foreign key that is taking the value from the primary key of the employee table, and the start date, end date, and the work assigned. So, if I have one more employee, it's going to just repeat it. So here, this is just made a link. Now you notice one other thing over here is it has automatically taken a separate field. This was not there in the definition of the table. So there's employee ID. So what is this employee ID? It is trying to link to the other table. So if you look at the previous table, the name of this table was employee, and the primary key of this was employee ID. So it creates a separate field called as employee ID to that particular thing. Can I change the name of the field? The answer is yes. You can change the name of the field, you can change the name of the table, you can do anything. It is configurable to any extent. You can do anything by putting the annotation. Now let's take one step ahead. Now what we have seen is it is possible for us to have one element that is embedded into the other and then create a table. Then we said we can embed the same type of element 2 or 3 times, maybe countable number of times, and then we can create a table. Next step, we went ahead and then said that we have a element, that is we have an entity, and we have a collection of items to be embedded inside it, and then it is possible. Now the next question is, can we take it one step ahead? And that one step ahead is, what if we have 2 entities to be stored? Now you notice over here, whatever I have created in this case, the second element, the element that I was trying to embed was not an entity. Why it is not an entity? It doesn't have its own existence. So you say that an address. Now if you say an address, the person is going to ask whose address is that. So address on its own does not have its existence. So for example, a result. A result of what? You're going to ask. Suppose if you get me the result, then the question is result of what? So that result cannot exist on its own. It has to be a part of something else. Now in my case, I have used something called as an address here. Now address on its own does not have its existence. So what I did was, let me go to the employee. What I did was I connected that address with the employee, but the employee has its own existence. Employee has a primary key you can represent it. Now let's take it one step ahead and let's assume that you have two entities. One can survive on its own, the other can survive on its own, but they are connected together. And this idea in the database is building a relationship between the tables. And you know very well, a table, you can map a table with one to one, one to many to one, and many to many. So can we think of creating this kind of relationship within our object and ask the Hibernate to store this information into the table? So let's take one step ahead and let's look at how we can build this kind of relationship. So let's look at the problem here. We have the aspects, and I know that these aspects are coming in between our coding, and the aspects are interconnected. So, for example, if you take the analytics is not at one place, analytics is there at all the other places. So, you will have to do the analysis of billing, analytics has to run on the network, analytics has to run on the cart item, and so on and so forth. So, you have the concern, and the concern is spanning across multiple classes. So, what is the AOP is trying to do? AOP is trying to avoid this cross-cutting concern. So what do we mean by saying avoiding this cross-cutting concern? Now, our work is to create a class that will help us in billing. Our work is supposed to create a class in networking and in maintaining the cart. And what AOP is trying to do now in our ordinary object-oriented paradigm, this is the structure that you get. In case of AOP, what you do is you take the concern, you keep it separate. Concern are separate. You don't bother about the concern. You notice that there is no connection between your billing class, your networking, your cart. They are all separate. You are going to code your business logic directly on there without bothering about the concern. This is what is the idea of aspect-oriented paradigm. So let's look at what is the fundamental difference between the aspect-oriented programming and the well-known object-oriented paradigm. Now, when we talk about the object-oriented paradigm, we are saying the modularity is achieved within the object or within the class. So, we say that the class will have its own data hidden from the outside world, and it has some methods for manipulating that data. So, you can imagine class as a module. What is the difference between this and the aspect-oriented programming? When we talk about the aspect-oriented programming, there is one problem with the object-oriented programming is object-oriented programming somehow cannot avoid this cross-cutting concern coming into the picture. So, in the aspect-oriented programming, what we do is we have an object, but the cross-cutting concerns are pulled out, and you are left with only that object. So you are going to concentrate, you are going to test, you are going to create the business logic, and you will only bother about that business logic. Suppose if your work is to create the analysis, security, and so on, so forth, that cross-cutting concern itself, then you will bother only about that without bothering about the business logic. So somehow you separate them out. Okay. So the idea of the aspect-oriented programming is to pull out the dependency of the object on the cross-cutting task and then make it separate. With the Java, it is not possible. For example, you may create other example over here is you may create an online student help service or something, and when a student logs in, or a lecturer may log in, or a principal may log in, so you need to know how to have the security. Whether all the pages are shown to the student, or whether you are supposed to not to show some pages to the student or some pages to the staff, and so on and so forth between the departments. So I'm not supposed to see the marks of the MBA department, or the MBA department is not supposed to see your marks because they are going to get targeted. So in that case, you you will have to have this cross-cutting concern. Java will not allow you to do that. And we need to somehow separate this one. See, this is what happens if you look at the diagram in the internet. The Mozilla people have done that thing, and they have shown how the cross-cutting concerns are coming in between. So what we are supposed to do is pull out all this cross-cutting concern, and even if you are not able to read it, so written one over here is your business logic. That's all. You are going to concentrate only on the business logic. Rest of them will be layered for you, and it's going to given to you. In other words, so they say that it is time to put a blanket over in the business logic, so that you don't have to bother about which blanket is being put into it. So let's look at the definition of the object-oriented programming. It's a way to aid you with something, that is the separation of concern. Okay, one other thing. It's not just a string which is famous for that. One of the famous languages is the AspectJ, which is based on the Java, and Spring also makes use of some of the techniques which are being used by the AspectJ. Spring is the second best known one. The others are not being used to that extent.